I'll add another name to the list to discuss because the Cleveland Cavaliers were eliminated on Wednesday night by the Boston Celtics. Their season is officially over, and with that, we had to hold off on all the Donovan Mitchell talk. It was sprinkling from everywhere else, but we said nope. We're waiting because
we're waiting for the expose.
We knew it was going to happen, and it has happened. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast. No Derek Bodner today. He's on vacation. Kyle Neubeck, Devon Givens, Brianna is here. We're here. Derek's not here at the desk. At least all of you are, and we
Derek's
appreciate
on vacation. He's already in the chat making. Come on, buddy.
Come on.
Go have a drink. Go get some sun. Go do something.
Settle
you don't
down,
have to
man.
hang out with us today. Enjoy
now,
that time off.
Is he driving and chatting with us?
I sure hope not.
Come on, man. Drive safe. Come on, man. Be safe. Well, look, we love the fact, of course, we appreciate everybody being here as always, but we definitely have to talk about, and there are a lot of branches to this. So when we talk about this tree sprouting with this conversation, we've already seen some comments. We've already seen some tweets where people have it yes, no. There are a lot of different layers to unpeel here with this conversation about Donovan Mitchell. He is, of course, an all-NBA level player. We know that. All-star. He certainly had a really good postseason. Missed Game 5 because of dealing with an injury.
Yeah.
So he sat out the game. Hey, they weren't going to win this series anyway, so hey, do what you need to do.
I wish we need to get a white flag to wave on the show.
Right.
Because that's what the Cavs basically did last night. I'm not saying Donovan did. I think at the team level.
Okay, we'll talk. We had a Marcus Morris moment of the night last night.
Oh, man.
He was hooping. He was hooping. I said it last night. I had to get it out there. But look, a lot to discuss, so we will discuss. First and foremost, how would the 76ers acquire Donovan Mitchell? That's the first question that we need to answer. What will it take for you as the Sixers organization? If you are doing so as a fan, what will it take? So we're going to discuss that first, of what it's going to take for the Sixers to hypothetically acquire Donovan Mitchell should they try to go that route this offseason. We'll get into some fit situations there with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid as part of a three-star team here. Would that be enough?
Yeah.
And a few other things to go along with the discussion. But first, what would it take, and would you be willing to give up whatever it takes to get Donovan Mitchell?
Well, first of all, I want to shout out, I always call him public enemy number one in the chat, right?
Yes.
Our friend Randy said that he would sell Money Mar down the river if it got the Sixers Evan Mobley. So,
a different little wrinkle.
A different wrinkle to the Cleveland situation.
Money Mar got to go.
I do want to bring everyone kind of up to speed on where the Cavs are at after last night, I think is the most important place to start, because not everybody would have read or heard about what happened. So, what was it, like 45 minutes after the game last night, which is what we were waiting for and expecting. We get a report from Shams Charania and I believe Jason Lloyd at The Athletic.
Yep.
Here are the big bullet points, and these are the important things, and then we'll unpack it from there. So JB Bickerstaff, his job is in jeopardy after 5.5 years. One of the main reasons that his job is in jeopardy is reportedly that Mitchell does not have a lot of confidence in Bickerstaff as a coach. And the Cavs have tailed off at the end of seasons the last few years. So that's a concern at the organizational level. Also for Mitchell, there's the Jarrett Allen component and how him and Evan Mobley work. And there's been some discussion league-wide, but it seems, according to this report, internally about why didn't Allen make it back during this playoff run. He was dealing with a bruised rib.
Yep.
There have been some people, certainly a lot of people I talked to around the league, who are giving Jarrett Allen the side eye for not at least getting on the floor for one of these games before the end of the year with what they thought was an injury you can play through. We obviously, on this show, or I think we've said many times, I don't do the whole soft or if you're hurt, you're hurt. You can't play, you can't play. But that's another piece of this. The other thing that's the big one is that it seems that Cleveland is coming to a point where they got to make a decision on Garland and Mitchell.
Yes.
That Mitchell has become more ball dominant over time there. That Darius Garland, after last season where he had a very good year, and everyone is kind of looking at him as, oh, he's going to make another leap. Now he has stagnated. I won't say regressed. I'd say stagnated is the right word. And he's represented by Rich Paul, very well-connected, powerful guy. And the implication is if Mitchell stays, and some people believe he will, that Garland is on the way out. And so all of that to arrive at a place where we don't know what the future holds for Donovan Mitchell. What we do know, or at least what I think I know, and I think you probably agree with me on this,
Yep.
it is going to cost way more to get Donovan Mitchell than most of the other, if not all of the other, at least semi-available players on the market. So the Jimmy Butlers of the world, even like your cousin, our family on the show, I think it'll probably cost more to get Mitchell than it would to get McHale, although we'll see depending on what the asking prices are there. If you go down the list of all those guys, Mitchell will be at the top of the board, and some of that is because the Lakers are interested, the Heat are interested, both New York teams are interested in Donovan. And so for the Sixers to have any shot to get Donovan, they have to be willing to go to basically as far as they can go with draft picks. We're talking about the 2026 first that they have from either the Clippers, Rockets, or Thunder, the 2028 Clippers first that they got in that Harden trade, the 2029 first of their own, this year's pick number 16. They have a Clippers swap in 2029, a handful of second-round picks that they own from both themselves, the Knicks, the Clippers, the Blazers in 2029. So a whole list of things. I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think if they wanted to get Mitchell, it would cost basically all of that.
Yep.
I'm not sure, as good as I think Donovan Mitchell is, that is worth it, because let's compare it to Jimmy Butler. If we were to say you set the line at 2 first-round picks for Jimmy, and I think that ultimately is fair, even if Miami probably doesn't agree to it today. In that scenario, you get Jimmy, and you still have some capital left over. Like you probably have a first or 2 firsts to go out there and say, hey, let's go to Chicago and talk about Alex Caruso, or maybe you can work out some kind of sign and trade with Denver for a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You get another high-level role player. Like, however that secondary trade or future trade looks, maybe you just hold on to those picks and say, let's see how the team shakes out ahead of the deadline. We're going to see what Mitchell, Maxey, Joel Embiid looks like. You have a backup plan, or you have some bullets left in the clip to pursue the type of in-between fit players that you need between that big three. With Mitchell, you got to send everything. And if it doesn't work, and there's a decent chance it won't, because Tyrese and Donovan, as we'll get to later, they're an okay fit. I don't think an ideal fit. Then you're kind of stuck. And then you say, all right, well, if this isn't working, more than likely we got to move one of the big three.
Sure.
And we talked a lot about on this show the repercussions of building around 3 stars with the way the salary cap and the new collective bargaining agreement works. So I think it would be a reasonable gamble. He is only 27. He'll be 28 years old in September. So he fits in that in your prime, all-star, all-NBA guy still at his peak. He fits the bill in all those ways. But then you have to decide, is it worth boxing the team in for that specific group of 3? I'm not so sure that's the case.
Yeah, and that is a lot to give up. Of course, you want to make sure a lot of things come together when you're certainly putting the team together. We talk so much about roster construction and what it looks like. Even as one of the names that we threw out on yesterday's show, just for sake of fun conversation about finding that Aaron Gordon mix, I threw out a name that in Anthony Simons, who can just score the basketball. Yeah. He's nowhere near the level of Donovan Mitchell. But the question, of course, when we discuss fit, and we'll get into more of that later, you want to make sure when you give up this many picks that a lot of things align with who you're pairing him with. And when you have everything that you have now stacked up that Daryl Morey currently has, and all of this discussion about not making certain moves at the trade deadline because you're setting yourself up for the offseason because of the treasure chest that you certainly do have, and you can dip into to go and acquire whatever player you target, Paul George, Brandon Ingram, Jimmy Butler, and now in this conversation here, as far as Donovan Mitchell, you better make sure it's right.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to give up for the questions that are still there. Now, the interesting part of it, of course, with all of these players that we do name, there are a lot of questions. There are so many questions with the age, the fit next to one or both of the stars that you currently have here in town. And you also want to make sure that the guy simply wants to be here. He's eligible for an extension off of you already laid out the time that he has left, the 2 years, player option 25-26. He's going to make 30 plus this season. He's eligible for an extension now.
And
he
the
can
extension,
make
I
All-NBA.
believe, is worth up to 4 years, $208 million.
And I think that is if he makes All-NBA, or it's because he made All-NBA last season.
I'm not, so I just know that right now he's eligible for a $200+ million
and
extension.
that's a big commitment, and you want to make sure that that's right. So if you're going to do that and you're going to give it up all that stuff, then you still have to roster build the rest of the team. Where you mentioned Alex Caruso, can you go, because as we've discussed so far already, you only have 4 players currently on the roster under contract, adding Paul Reed and Ricky Council to that mix. And by the way, for the people who already jumped in before we got started and just simply saying, give up what? Tyrese Maxey? No. You're only doing any move to pair him with Maxey and Embiid, whoever it is.
We are past the point of talking about trading Tyrese Maxey, I
so
promise
let's just
you.
make that very, very clear. Maxey's going nowhere. It's just a matter of this. So if you're going to do this, you got to do it right. And is it worth giving up all of that? Because Kyle laid out a lot of stuff there. Are you willing to give up all of that in order to get Donovan Mitchell? Is Donovan Mitchell worth all of that? Is he good enough for all of that after you saved all of these picks to get to this point, to not make the trades at the trade deadline and send away other smaller pieces that you maybe could have traded, Jaden Springer, stuff like that, to set up for this spot? Is Donovan Mitchell the right one to pair with the Philadelphia 76ers? It's a worthy gamble, as Kyle said. I will agree with that. He's not my favorite of all the names that we've laid out there to pair up with this group, because of some of the deficiencies that are there. I like watching Donovan Mitchell from afar. I was a real big fan coming out of Louisville, what he did in Utah. I was against everybody arguing him and Simmons and the Rookie of the Year as if he wasn't deserving because Simmons was the #1 pick before and what he was doing. Mitchell was damn good. He has gotten better every single year. And you saw it even in this playoff run where he has been phenomenal, especially against the Orlando Magic and doing the things that he did against the Boston Celtics. I don't know that he's the right or perfect fit, as close to perfect, with this group to give up all of that for Donovan Mitchell. And that's going to be the interesting part. And don't forget, Bree put it up there in our chat here on YouTube. All in on Mitchell. Go vote on the chat there, and we'll see what the results are.
Now, so here's the counter to all and there's a fair bit of don't trade for him, and I get that. I think I probably lean that way at the end of the day. However, he is somebody that fits in the timeline we're talking about and provides you with a runway that the Paul Georges, the LeBrons, the Jimmy Butlers simply don't. Right, like. Everyone's been begging for, stop chasing these old men, like look for somebody else. Mitchell is, I would say, he's one of the only in their prime stars or close to stars that is gettable at all right now, because 27-year-olds who average 27 points, 6 assists per game, make 37% of their threes, shooting 9 a game.
Yeah.
They don't just grow on trees.
No, they don't.
They're not. I understand, and we're going to get into the specific on-court fit, but there's a guy that was just outside the top 5 in MVP voting last year, a routine all-star, a guy who has now proven on 2 different teams in 2 different contexts that he can go out and score. And frankly, one of the things we've seen for the Sixers in playoff situations is that there is a logical endpoint for playing through Joel Embiid as the hub in crunch time offensively. Like I think Joel has proven he is the real deal defensively. at the end of games, in playoff games, even when he's not healthy, frankly, like has been an awesome rim protector. That's the last line of defense, blah, 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 blah. But we all saw the fourth quarter numbers for him, and that's not to say it's all his fault, but Mitchell is a guy you give the ball to down the end of games, and he will walk you down. He will get his own shot. He will score, and he can carry you on that end of the floor. And I get that some people want to hope that Tyrese is going to become that guy, right?
Yeah.
And to some degree, he already has been. Like we've talked about the increased trust between Joel and Tyrese and being able or being willing to step aside as the leader, the best player on the team and say, okay, Tyrese, you got it cooking. We're playing through you. I don't care. And the trust that has been built there. Well, you would then have a second guy next to Maxey,
bona fide second guy
who could do that. And then it's on a given night where any one of those guys in theory could be your number one option. Like Maxey has it cooking, let it go to him. And I'm getting too far into the fit already.
Oh, we'll get there. It's all right.
We're progressing toward where I actually want to go.
It's hard not to talk about all of that and not
this
mention
conversation.
the fit,
but
right.
yeah, so like all I'm trying to say as it relates to the price is that you don't get lots of opportunities like this. And I do understand the imperfect fit stuff, that you don't want two small guards necessarily. I do think Mitchell can be a good defender in the backcourt if he's properly engaged.
It's part of his profile coming out of Louisville.
Yes.
It's there.
It's there, but I always lean toward, if we don't see it enough, then it's not really there. Now,
Sure.
That being said, the Cavs have had very good regular season defenses the last couple of years. Some of that is because they have two bigs that have defended at a high level, right? And they figured out how to do that. But some of he hasn't been an active deterrent for them to build a good, solid defense that, frankly, has been a big part of why they have been in the playoffs and have been a good team in the regular season. So I say all that to say I'm not pounding the table to trade for Donovan Mitchell. I do think if I had my wish, if you could turn Donovan Mitchell into a wing, if Paul George was 29 years old, if Jimmy Butler was 29, 30 years old, and that was the guy who's available, push all the chips in, go and get those guys. But those aren't the choices that the Sixers have in front of them. What they have to choose from, and this summer, it all goes away, right? Like they have to do something. They have to sign somebody. They have to trade for someone. He is in that age bracket that we've been talking about so often, that you can straddle the fence, you can compete now and still have a little bit of flexibility later. And by the way, you and I have talked about this some. I don't know how much people in the chat are aware of. I think Donovan and Joel have a pretty good relationship.
Yes, they do.
And if we're talking about, who you want to bring in from a personality standpoint, it's somebody that is not, it's a star. He might be a ball dominant star, but he's a ball dominant star who already has the foundation with the best player on the team. And certainly Tyrese Maxey is not going to cause problems for anybody. He's going to get his big deal this summer. And he's already shown the flexibility. You can have 3 All-Stars. You can have 3 All-Stars. Right. The big question would be, how much of a team can you build out around those 3 guys? And that is ultimately where you have to make the decision, is can you build a championship caliber team in today's NBA with 3 max level guys? I'm not so sure that you can anymore.
Yep. All right. Well, we have a lot to get into. We're going to get into the fit next. We have a lot to discuss about this. The fit. Everybody go vote there on the little voting option you have there.
It looks like we're at about 75%.
Keep it going.
No way.
Keep it going, folks. Let's see what you have. And when we get back, we'll tell you about more and the fit and all of that. But also have to tell you right now, we are in the season of allergies, and we've talked about that so much. But also simply protecting yourself in regards to the vaccines. Protect yourself and your family by staying up to date on your immunizations. If you have questions about vaccines, you can stop and ask our friends at Rite Aid right there at the pharmacy. Book a vaccine appointment today. You can schedule yourself or for your whole family at riteaid.com/schedule. Rite Aid pharmacists can vaccinate for COVID-19, shingles, pneumonia, whooping cough, chickenpox, and so much more. What is RSV? It's a highly contagious seasonal virus that infects the respiratory tract. It is a very common issue in young children, and most will be affected by the age of 2. So if you have young children, you want to make sure the RSV simply is a contagious thing. A lot in school, a lot of kids being out there, you want to make sure that they are right. Although RSV typically causes mild COVID-like symptoms, it can cause serious lung infections, especially in infants, older adults, and those with chronic medical conditions and or a weakened immune system. How about COVID-19? We've known so much about it since the year 2020. The CDC recommends everyone age 5 and older should get 1 dose of an updated COVID-19 vaccination. Children aged 6 months to 4 need multiple doses of the COVID-19 vaccinations, including at least 1 dose of updated the COVID-19 vaccine. Not sure what you need? Ask your Rite Aid pharmacist. Rite Aid pharmacists may immunize children ages 3 and older for COVID-19. And then you have one more, shingles. Shingles, of course, painful rash caused by the same virus that caused chickenpox. It usually develops on one side of the face or body. I had chickenpox when I was younger. I remember in middle school, had my people, my classmates bringing me my homework.
Chickenpox are a rite of passage.
Oh, man. They would bring my homework home for me. I had to stay on the couch and away from like everybody, not in my bedroom and all that stuff. Mom was very helpful. My siblings were helpful. It was a pain in the ass. That was tough, of course, with the chickenpox. Shingles can be just as painful and uncomfortable. Also, as you get older, your risk for having shingles and serious complications increases. So, select Rite Aid stores have a dedicated pharmacy ready to administer vaccines and answer all of your questions. If you do have questions on what immunizations you need, not sure if you're up to date, feeling nervous to ask questions, don't be nervous. A Rite Aid pharmacist will take the time to make personalized recommendations based on your health history and discuss any concerns. No questions are too small. Walk in, schedule an appointment Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. State, age, and health restrictions do apply. Ask a Rite Aid pharmacist for details. You don't want to have chickenpox or shingles or any of that stuff. Is very uncomfortable. Now, we tell you that our show is brought to you by our good friends from BetParx app. Get in the zone with the BetParx Sportsbook app. Your baseball team, money is in the moments. They're back on the field tonight and they're home after a 2-game set in New York, beating down that stinking New York team. They have them for a few more games here in Philadelphia. Same squad. Philadelphia back home tonight to take on those stinking New York squad with the orange and blue. And if you want to bet against them because your baseball team has won 3 straight, 8 of their last 10, you got to go to BetParx Sportsbook app. Win big with all-day action. Win your first $10 bet and earn $125 in sports bonus bets. You play for fun. You love to win. You bet. Download the app and play along with us. Must be 21 or older. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
No shade to you, Jonte Porter, but you might want to call that number, buddy.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Don't try to go to different sites. You stay away from BetParx Sportsbook app. You can just watch games now, you know.
He's going to be watching a lot of games.
Watching a lot of games. Can he go overseas? He can go overseas and play, can he?
I'd assume so.
Yeah. So he can still
he only
make
got
money.
banned from the NBA. You still got, the CBA, you got the EuroLeague, you go down under, you can play for the Capitanes and is that Mexico?
Is that Mexico? Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. Well, guess what? You can't go to BetParx Sportsbook app. Stay away, buddy. Stay away. All right. Staying away from Donovan Mitchell, or go all in to pair him with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Folks, when we look at the fit, let's go back to a couple of seasons ago, last offseason, Bradley Beal. Or before that, trade deadline, where the report was Joel Embiid wanted Daryl Morey to look into Washington's situation with Bradley Beal because of their relationship. Another 6'3" guard, scoring out of his mind. We saw him lead the league in scoring for a couple of seasons there in Washington, but was it the right fit with Tyrese Maxey? We didn't see this Tyrese Maxey at that point, but you can kind of see some things in there that it might have gotten to this level of play from Tyrese Maxey. And the question was, do you give up Maxey? Could you pair those two together? That was the question. Now Maxey is an all-star, all-NBA candidate, and he is eligible for a max extension this offseason, which we all know he's going to get from the Philadelphia 76ers. So would that match with Mitchell and Maxey, two smaller guards in the backcourt again, hypothetically giving up the Anthony Simons piece? He's nowhere near Donovan Mitchell, but part of it was the small guard combination. Could that fit? The big answer was no. Even though I brought the name up, I agree with Derek and Kyle. The answer is no. This guy's different because he's supersized. He's a supersized version of what Anthony Simons wants to be.
Yeah.
And the All-NBA stuff, the All-Star part of it, can carry a team, can close a game where if Embiid is double teamed, if Maxey doesn't have it going on, you can lean on this other player, and that is Donovan Mitchell. But what does that look like on the floor? Two smaller guards. They both dig in sometimes defensively, but in the end, you can't just focus on the one side. You have to focus on the other. So with that, we'll get to the other part later of what do you now have to have around those between those three, what has to be out there on the floor. But those two fits together. What do you say there first?
So let's start with offensively, because if you were to trade for Mitchell, your bet is that you're going to amplify the offense so much that any of the defensive concerns are not irrelevant, but as close to irrelevant as you can get. Because I think the positive side of a Mitchell-Maxey fit is that both guys can play off the ball. Like I think why the Garland-Mitchell pairing has not worked as well as it needs to in Cleveland, other than the fact that they're playing two big men and kind of cramping the spacing and whatnot, is that Garland is still a guy, and might always be a guy, that needs the ball in his hands to be effective. And I know that Mitchell is a really ball-dominant player, and I'm not ignoring that. I'm not ignoring that, especially because it's still a Joel Embiid world. It's still where you're going to play through him at the elbow and have to figure out how valuable Donovan is as a catch-and-shoot guy, an off-ball cutter, all that type of stuff. But Maxey makes it work in a way that I think Garland cannot. We've already seen quite often, especially playing with James Harden, but even this season when he's playing next to a Lowry, a DeAnthony Melton, just another ball handler, that Maxey as a movement shooter, as a guy who's creating the space for someone like Mitchell to attack, he is not just comfortable in that role, but he is great at it. He is a great off-ball weapon. He's somebody the ball swings his way. Either he can knock down an open three, or he's able to blow by somebody and attack the rim. Or if he gets stopped at the rim on top of that, hits Joel, hits Kelly Oubre, hits a cutter with a drop-off pass, and it's an easy 2 points. And so both of those guys can do that. The question would be on the buy-in side, right? It's like, how much is Tyrese Maxey willing to step aside? How much is Donovan Mitchell willing to step aside? And everything that I have heard about Donovan Mitchell, and certainly that has been reported coming out of this loss to Cleveland, is that the number one thing for him is winning, right? Like the thing that he wants. There's been all the talk about he wants New York specifically. He's from the New York area, and like that's why there have been all these rumors about him wanting to get out of Cleveland. I think in ideal world, right, he would love to play in New York, but it has to come with, I can compete for championships. I can go on deep playoff runs.
And again, the same question resides there where, remember, it was the Mitchell thing first before Brunson.
Yes.
Once Brunson became Brunson, how are they now going to fit? Same issue.
And so it's all the same questions there. And because of the relationship with Joel that we mentioned, because I think Tyrese is adaptable, I think Mitchell would look at the Sixers and say, I would not mind playing in Philadelphia. Now, the other side of the ball, to your point, is where you start to have questions, because it's not just that Maxey and Mitchell are undersized and they will compete when on the defensive end when they're locked in. It's playoff time. It's a big matchup, whatever. However, we've seen Mitchell go through long periods and even seasons at a time where he's disengaged and he's carrying such a huge offensive load that he scales back as a defender. The hope would be by having Joel with him, you mitigate some of that. And frankly, with Tyrese and Joel carrying portions of the offense and you not needing to be that guy every single moment, every single night, that more of the energy can be applied on defense. I think that's a risk, right? It's always a risk to say this guy doesn't always defend, but maybe he will, because I believe you have to want to defend. That's where you see somebody's motivation show up the most on the basketball court, is on the defensive end of the floor, and rebounding, which to me is bundled in with defense. So that's number one. But the other part of it, on the team building side, if your resources are committed to Joel Embiid, max contract, Tyrese Maxey, max contract soon to come, Donovan Mitchell, max extension soon to come, you just don't have the resources to get real wings on this team, right? Like, forget about getting let's say the $15 to $25 million type of role player wings that a lot of these good teams have. I know I keep bringing his name up a lot, but Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, great example. The sort of player that I think every really good team needs. I don't think you have a path to acquiring that player. And so you have to, at probably the most important spot in the modern NBA, those 2 through 4 spots, the 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" guys who can attack off the dribble, who space you out, who can mismatch hunt in the post, you don't really have options, or you more than likely won't have options to defend those types of players. And when the game slows down in the playoffs, when it turns more into a my guy is better than your guy type of offense and style, that is a real and severe risk for the Sixers. Now, I'm not saying if you have Paul George, that's not a risk, because we saw in that first round series they had, he was hanging out guarding PJ Tucker, or not PJ Tucker. He was sitting out guarding PJ Washington in the corner. He's not taking those big defensive challenges that you need to have. So I'm not saying all these other options that are on the table for the Sixers avoid this same problem. But we're saying way into the future, you're loaded up on backcourt and at center in a league that is increasingly about wings. That would give me some real pause if I'm Daryl Morey.
Yeah, and there was one in the chat a little bit earlier in the first segment that laid out that exact point. Get me more wings. Doesn't mean you won't get those wings, because I think with the team building that comes with it, you have no choice but to get the wings when you have
basically
two smaller.
Everybody else is wings.
Yeah, exactly. You have two smaller guys there in the backcourt. You're going to need some size, 6'5", 6'6", all the way up to 6'8", 6'9", whatever it might be, that are versatile. And the thing is, in today's NBA, and this is the fun part about the conversation, is when you start to discuss all those matchup things, cross-matching in today's NBA, they're geniuses at it now of how to hide players. And sure, offensively, they're smart because they want to get you caught in a switch where it's beneficial to them. But they also do a really good job on the defensive end of making sure that you hide in certain places where you cannot be exploited because of your weaknesses on the defensive end. Offensively, I think it would be so supersized and so supercharged, to your point, that there will be a lot of games where the defense won't matter, because their defense starts by leading to the
regular
offense
season, you will just
that
outscore
is going,
teams.
Absolutely, and their defense is going to lead to offense because they'll have good enough defensive plays that just happen in a 48-minute game that they're going to win their 50-plus and be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. And you have Joel Embiid. You give him a little bit of a break. We talk about Joel Embiid playing 72, 65, 60 games. You might also extend his season based on how good those two are. Yeah. We did see it already in a sense with James Harden, more of a point guard, but in the size. Now, the 6'3", DeAnthony Melton backcourt with Tyrese Maxey has worked, but it's a different player, so that lends into a different discussion. However, even though we discuss all of these things that may not work, and I say it's not the perfect fit, because they are so good offensively, they might be able to get away with it, and get away with it for a long stretch where you go deep into the playoffs finally in an Embiid era, because of how good these two guys are in the backcourt. Kyle brought up a bunch of times the relationship with Joel Embiid. Part of that is this. We both discussed this before with us not talking about a lot of stuff in the past because we didn't work together. We can share a lot of the things that we've heard now that we share this table with Derek and Rich here going forward. based on what I knew when Donovan Mitchell, before he was traded to Cleveland, folks from Utah, they had an early exit. And from what I was told is he wasn't here by accident. Now, it didn't...
Sitting courtside and watching a Sixers game.
Yes, he was sitting courtside watching the Sixers in a playoff game because he was ousted. And it wasn't by accident. So make of that what you will 2 years later, now that he has played 2 seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's up to Daryl Morey to figure that out. Talk to Maxey and Embiid to see if that's something that they're willing to do because, again, they have to give up so much and the building has to go in a lot of different directions, which we can get into in our next segment of how you fill out the rest of that starting 5, rest of that bench that's meaningful, especially for the playoffs. But when you do look at their offense and how supercharged it could be and what they would be able to do, that's a lot of offensive punch that can make up for a lot of maybe defensive mistakes. Because when you are exploiting on the other end of Mitchell and Maxey defensively with that smaller backcourt, your goal now as a coaching staff is to have those wings that can defend those other people and not let it hurt you enough when that switch happens. But when that stuff does happen, guess what? My guys here in the backcourt with Embiid are probably averaging 25 and up, all 3 of them. Can you
have 3 guys who can get 30 in any game, and it won't even be that difficult.
Can you outscore my 75 there plus my other 30 plus that's going to come from a number of other players? And that's where that math game comes in with all of that. And that's what makes this so fascinating in talking about Donovan Mitchell, who's not as perfect as we might look at Butler or George, or even getting into that wing that we say is not perfect in Brandon Ingram, but at least the fit might be a little more seamless because he at least has size on him.
Yeah.
Where you can, again, build around with someone like Caruso at the 2, with him, Maxey in the backcourt, or even another 6'7", 6'8" guy in the front court with Joel Embiid and Brandon Ingram. But he's so good offensively that stuff right there might take away from the deficiencies, the issues that you might have defensively. I'll tell you what, 82 games of a regular season shows here with these guys and Bree and all of you. Boy, that would be fun, man. We'd be talking about a lot of, just make sure that the thumbnail says 47. Because he dropped 47, or 50 for Joel Embiid, or Maxey with his 40, because there will be this league, yes, defensively, it's a lot. The league is scoring too. If you can score, you might be able to win. Now, Phoenix might show something totally different. I'm going to
come back to that point in a minute.
Phoenix might show something totally different, but to your point, it's also about wanting to play with the guys that you're playing with, and Maxey is one of the easiest players to fit with and play and feel good about your situation, we think.
Well, still a whole lot more to go.
We got a lot to get to.
However, if you're annoyed at your favorite Sixers podcast hosts about who they want to trade for,
my bad.
If you're going through a long off season where it's like, man, and I see it from some of you, which guy are they going to talk about next? I know that there's a better way. There is a chiller way. You can choose chill and reach for an ice cold Coors Light, because with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice cold beer when the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans as they hit that perfect temperature. I'm looking forward, guys, to a long summer of hopefully much warmer weather, much sunnier weather than we've been getting in Philadelphia recently. But listen, you got to live through those cloudy days, those rainy days, those dreary days in the spring to get to the fun times in the summertime. You can't let it get you down. You got to focus on the good feelings, the good vibes, the free agency signings to come, maybe the draft day moves that are on the horizon for the Sixers. And when you do that, when you reach that chill, that nice feeling that we all want you to have each and every day, you can also reach for Coors Light, which is a cold layered, cold filtered, cold packaged beer with a smooth finish, mountain cold refreshment. You can have that here. You can have it in the Rocky Mountains. You can have it overseas. You can have it just about anywhere. And when you choose to rise above it all, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company in Golden, Colorado.
Choosing chill.
And guys, I know that we all wish the Sixers were still in the playoffs. We had local games to watch, local games to attend. But look, these have been an exciting NBA playoffs, a lot of fun matchups, a lot of next season,
Oh, man.
when you're preparing to go to the games, whether it's Donovan Mitchell here, whether it's Paul George, Jimmy Butler, friend and family of the pod, Mikal Bridges, who's to say? Go to Game Time to get your tickets, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff or regular season tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off, so it does not matter if you leave it to the last minute. Game Time has the hookup for you. There are last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It is easy to get tickets for any game that you want. And by the way, I know I always bring this up. We always bring it up. You can see the exact view from your seats before you even purchase the tickets.
Panoramic view.
In certain arenas, certain stadiums, like there are great viewing areas all throughout Citizens Bank Park for a Phillies game, for example, but not every ballpark and not every stadium is built like that. So Game Time being able to show you that for concerts, for sporting events, I think is a great part of the Game Time experience. They also have their lowest price guarantee and event cancellation protection and job loss protection. So if something happens to you, can't make it, event gets canceled, weather messes things up, Game Time always has your back. And with their lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better deal elsewhere. Can't beat that. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA, MLB, all kinds of other tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
That event cancellation protection is important. You know why? Because the games don't often get canceled. It's those entertainers, man. They bail out on you the day before the show, and you're like, oh, man, now I'm ruined. What am I going to do with
I know
these
we talked
tickets?
about it on the show way back in,
Come
I think it was
on.
in the fall or the winter that I thought about going to see Lauryn Hill
Yes.
at Wells Fargo.
Yep.
She is notorious for
Lateness.
either she's super late or no shows. It's like, hey, 3 hours after you were supposed to come on, and everyone's like, where the hell is Lauryn Hill? Allegedly, she's worth the wait, is a great performer.
Fair.
And she's got a lot of great music from way back in the day, from when I was younger, but it's not worth the risk for me. So
notorious.
Game Time takes the risk out of it.
They do. Now, we also had one saying from Gene, our buddy Gene Ross, any theater time, boys?
We'll have to see what's
It's the
showing at the
off-season now.
theater this summer. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's the off season. We might be able to fit that into the schedule. We'll see about Vegas or something, if there's something that we
And I
can
will
do
say,
there.
I know our colleague Gina Mizell covers the Sixers at the Inquirer. She is like the Broadway queen.
Is she?
So if we ever need a theater recommendation, that's probably who
we
I'll
know
go
where to go.
I'll
By
go
the way,
with.
the team that you mentioned in Mexico, our buddy Derek Bodner, driving,
Yeah.
checking in. Ja.
Oh, yeah. That's Ja's squad.
Yeah. 20 and 10, easy. 20 and 10, easy.
I was going to say, speaking of, I know a lot of people in the chat, certainly us and everyone around the city, plenty of complaints about the Sixers these days, right? I want to remind everyone how
The rebuild.
how within the last 10 years, we
man.
were spending articles, radio segments, TV, spending hours and hours and hours and hours of our time arguing Jahlil Okafor versus Nerlens Noel.
Yeah, man.
We're in a good place as a community that those are way in the rear view, and we're talking about Mitchell versus Butler versus George versus Brandon Ingram.
Adding
like,
to Maxey
real
and Embiid.
basketball players.
Yes. Adding to Maxey and Embiid. By the way, the 20 and 10 reference was from Sean, who said 20 and 10 easy on that Mexico
rolls
squad
out
for Ja.
out of bed and gets 20 and 10.
No problem. And look,
Maybe the
folks,
20, but definitely not the 10. That
and-
was.
oh man, that was,
I don't want to go back down.
Nah,
that road.
especially the little off the court issues that started to pop up in Boston on the Ben Franklin Bridge, stuff like that. Down Center City.
That's the biggest W that Philadelphia got against Boston during that
big
time
time.
period.
Yep.
Was the haymaker
And
that
then
Jahlil threw.
he had to go punch the hell out of somebody.
By the way, I will say, like, the career obviously went off the rails compared to what people thought. I have dealt with Ja when he was here and
Same.
elsewhere, and he's a super nice guy. And
He was
so,
a very nice guy. Very
good
nice
dude
guy.
that I just came into the league at the wrong time, right? I think if he had played in a different era, it works out a lot differently for him.
His dad was interesting also.
He was something.
He had the perfect seat right along the baseline on right where the Sixers bench was, and his voice was often heard. All right.
So I want to circle back to something you were talking about where the offense can be so good that
dynamic,
it neutralizes everything else. This year, Denver's defense, I believe, is better than it ever has been during the Jokic era. But I do think you see how having the level of offense they do feeds into that, right? Like part of Minnesota's problem over these last 3 games against Denver is that they cannot stop the Nuggets. And so every time they go down, and Minnesota, their big concern coming into the playoffs is half-court offense, they're going against a set defense more often than not. Like Jokic is scoring or Jokic is playmaking or Murray scoring or Murray setting up Aaron Gordon, KCP, Michael Porter Jr., whoever it is. They score, and then they have to go down there and try to attack a set defense. And whatever you think about, like, I still don't think Jokic is the greatest defender in the world. Obviously, that goes without saying. But when he can get back and they're set and they're established, what he has to his game, which is the intelligence on that end of the floor, that shows up a lot more than when you're playing in semi-transition and early offense where you're in scramble mode, you have cross matches, guys can, like Ant-Man can attack somebody in isolation. By scoring the ball, you're giving your defense a better chance every single time down the floor. It's why you're able to still have a high-level defense when James Harden was here, because their offense was executing at such a high level. So we can say, like, look, in crunch time, in matchups against teams like Boston, where Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, those guys can play my turn, your turn, force the switches, do all this stuff in the half court. That's all well and good, and I think that might end up coming back to bite you at some point. But for long stretches of the season, even long stretches of playoff games, you can get so nuclear hot that none of that stuff matters, because if you can get Joel Embiid back and at the rim, back in that drop coverage, back to cover up the weaknesses that they have at the point of attack, you can eliminate a lot of those problems. Where my concern would be, if we're talking about defense beyond just the individual matchup stuff, even though Mitchell is a good rebounder for a guard, he's still just a good rebounder for the position. He's not a good rebounder on the scope of the NBA. And as we're bringing up the issues with, well, you only have so much money to go out and get the wings, well, you're probably not getting wings that are both competent offensively, good defenders, and going to help with the rebounding problem. You're going to have to make a choice. Like, can you get 2 out of 3? That's probably going to be good enough. And then you have to worry about whatever the downside is with that. And bringing it back to the beginning of the show, where we're talking about the cost and what have you, I think a sneaky important thing, if you were trading for Mitchell, is that when you lose this year's first round pick, like the long-term stuff matters, right? Like that 2029, the 2020, those are valuable picks. But if you're going all in to get Mitchell, that 16th pick this year, even if the upside on it is not super high, I think being able to get a role player contributor, someone who can grow with these guys, someone who can play a two-way role, would be so essential with that pick specifically, because when you give away everything else, you're losing most, if not all, of your opportunities to get those developing players moving forward.
Yeah.
And I would want to have at least 1 or 2 guys, preferably more, but at least 1 or 2 guys who are growing with these guys and can be your chance to still have upside on the team, because the rest of the roster is going to be minimum contract players, whoever you can get. And in most cases, those will be older players, ring chasing types, guys in their 30s. I would love to hold on to some semblance of this is a long-term bet, someone who can come in off the bench, give you energy, someone who might be able to grow into like a 5th starter type of player. The Devon Carters, the guys that we're talking about that have that two-way profile. And that pick weirdly enough, I think becomes more valuable if you're trading absolutely everything else.
And
so
that's where
it's tough.
That's where bringing back Ricky Council, at least to start, yes, the 16th pick to add to him would be really, really crucial because of everything that you just laid out, at his size, his frame, his build, and he has a year under his belt, and you could see where he can continue to develop and potentially be one of those undrafted players that makes a name for himself. That would be very, very helpful. But that's why we also talked about if you don't give up that 16, there could be someone there young enough that you would have around in your organization for a while here to start to build that, because we see those players on these other teams in the playoffs that are making contributions. And the one that we recently talked about was Kason Wallace as a number 10 overall pick for Oklahoma City, and he's playing big minutes for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So those definitely matter. And that's why this discussion is so fun, because as you're talking about that, you're doing your reads and all, I'm looking at the chat. No, you need 2 stars and a bunch of role players. I know Vince is big on that. Vince, our buddy Vince Pellegrini, is a big part of that. But there's people here in the chat talking about that. Get the role players. You only need the 2 stars. Then there's others who are saying just that. No, you can score in today's league and win big games. Then I had the question thrown to me from Michael Belfatti that says, Devon, when was the last time a championship team outscored their opponents? And the only one I really had was the Golden State Warriors.
Game.
Well,
they
yeah, that for sure. No question. Yes, every single game.
I understand what the point.
But the outscoring and putting up big numbers, the Golden State Warriors, that was always their thing. Now, you're talking about multiple Hall of Famers there, but I answered the question. Whether it was the right answer or not, I answered the question. But that's why this discussion is so fun and important, because this player might be available from Kyle saying the Lakers, staying with Cleveland, the Miami Heat, either New York team, and potentially somebody else that may come out of nowhere like the Philadelphia 76ers. Scoring matters in today's NBA. Offense always matters. Defense, certainly, they say wins championships, but offense always, always, always matter too. And if you can outscore teams like Denver, as Kyle mentioned, and your defense is able to get back and set, you're good. James Harden was a turnstile. We knew that. There were a lot of times, though, where people were like, oh, James Harden doesn't look all that bad out there on the floor when he's playing defense. Why? Because you have extra
pieces. And he's
the
worst type of defender, where it's less that he doesn't have the ability and more that he doesn't care.
Doesn't care.
And that's way harder to build around than somebody who's got limitations, but it is at least like, if you're away from the ball, if you're watching somebody else's man try to break down a defense, and your guy's trying to back cut you or come up and around, or coming off a pin down for a shot, you have to stay locked in. And Mitchell has had problems with that at times, but nowhere, at least in what I have seen from him over the years, it's nowhere near as bad as Harden's defense.
And his defense has always had, which is why they were ranked pretty high every time he played, every team he played for. Utah had Rudy Gobert. Now you had the 2 tall guys in Cleveland, 2 of the better defenders there. He's always had that, and he would have Joel Embiid here also. Sure, he's had Joe Ingles that plays defense, Royce O'Neal who played defense in Utah, and that's where we discussed that we had to get to a little bit more of those types of players that would still need to be rounded out here, whether it be, I guess we can kind of lead into that just a bit before we get to our Super Chats. Kelly Oubre. Nick Batum also was brought up here in the conversation. Those players that you meant, Ricky Council.
You have to try to keep at
D'Anthony
least
Melton,
one of those guys, if not all.
Right. If you get
handful of them.
If Council is going to be back, you look at those 3 and say, okay, can you at least keep 1 or 2 of those guys on a decent enough contract to be a part of that mix? And then what else would the starting 5 look like? That's the other piece of those. What prototype of player would you look for there at that other
think you
wing
have
position?
to get somebody like real rebounders at the 3 and 4. And as I was saying previously, I think the problem with that is that those guys are going to come with some kind of deficiency elsewhere, whether it's like closer to what we would think of as more of a traditional 4, that, all right, that guy's going to hit the glass hard. That's someone he can kind of live in that dunker spot area on offense and crash the glass, be an outlet and what have you, but might not space the floor as much.
That's what I was going to say. Does he have to be a shooter?
And might not be able to put it on the floor quite as much. I don't know. Like it's so not him specifically, like, but are we looking at a Robert Covington type guy at that spot where he's got very obvious offensive limitations, but defensively, at least a younger Robert Covington has real value there, was a very good rebounder at his position. So someone like that. Kelly Oubre, I think, is going to be if you can get a guy like that shoots a little better, it costs, $30 million a year. So, and that's the tricky part. Like 3-and-D, I think Derek said this on the show this week, and it's right. When people say 3-and-D, like, oh, this guy's a 3-and-D player, in most cases, they're not as good as they need to be on one end of the floor. Either the guy's a very good shooter and a kind of defender, or the other way around. Like, good example, D House, who was here, who we love D House, the personality, the character, the Dr. Pepper drinker, the Whataburger guy, like for all he brought to the locker room. We are grateful, we are appreciative.
Right.
But he wasn't really good enough as a shooter or a defender to get regular minutes under two different coaches in very different circumstances with the roster. And so those are the types of players you're probably going to have to gamble on, right? To play around these guys. Because the one thing you would give House and guys like that credit for is they don't need lots of shots, or they don't demand lots of shots.
Right.
Anyway, they are going to be infrequent offensive players, but still bought in on the defensive end of the floor. And those guys are very hard to find. I know if you talk to whether it's current or former players, it's something that I think has become clearer and clearer to me over time. It is really difficult to ask. It doesn't matter if they're the last guy on the bench or they're your fourth and fifth starters. If you aren't getting touches and shots, it's really hard to expect somebody to bust their ass and lock in on the other end of the floor. And so that's the last piece of the fit that I really think of, right? You would have 3 high-volume offensive guys, and it's already hard enough to find all the touches that you need for them, but you would figure it out. I think somebody would figure out, I got to step back. And maybe that's Joel. Maybe Joel says, I'm going to buy in more on defense and rebounding, and I will leave more of the offensive responsibility to Donovan and Tyrese.
And it could extend his season.
And it could. It could make them the team that they need to be. But beyond that, you do need to find pockets of time where it's like, okay, there are not many PJ Tuckers in the world where they might get 4 shots in a game and they're still scrambling around like a maniac, attacking the glass, defending the other team's best player. Not many people are built like that mentally, and that's not even a criticism. That's just natural. Like I always bring it back to pickup games, right? Mm-hmm. You might play with 2 guys in a 5-man group at a run at the park who are way better than everybody else, and they're taking all the shots. And when you're winning, it's like, all right, yeah, I'll get up and down. I'll set screens. I'll do all this.
We're all good.
But what happens when it goes south? What happens when Donovan Mitchell is 10 for 28? What happens when
flailing starts, the pouting, finger
and you're
pointing.
getting beat when these guys have to be the transition defenders, the guys getting back. When you miss the 3, they're the ones screaming down the floor trying to chase everybody else. How does that work? And frankly, if we're talking about free agency, what's the sales pitch to those guys? Can you tell, like, will they be sold by you'll get open and easy shots playing with these guys? And will they believe that, or will they say, I'm never going to touch the ball? Because that's just not how these guys play. Yeah. And so there'd be a big challenge on the recruitment front, but also on the coaching side for Nick Nurse to, design looks for these other guys. Not necessarily because you want to get 10 to 15 shots for the other starters, but because you want to get their best effort on the other end of the floor. That's always a huge challenge.
Yeah, so that's why we discussed what we discussed yesterday, folks, that Aaron Gordon type player that will buy into your role.
Yeah.
And we named a bunch of players. Could they do that? Could they fit in there? It's not always going to be perfect, as we mentioned. I had a weird one as you laid out the Robert Covington piece. Of course, Ryan Anderson is the type of player next to a big that we know that in the past, the shooting guy that Daryl Morey has liked when he was with James Harden, you still had a nice center in Dwight Howard. You have Ryan Anderson out there on the floor to spread things around. It was just a fun one that I mentioned to you yesterday off the air. He's a maniac. But to your point,
You need maniacs on the team.
And
right?
here's the maniac that I was going to throw at you that we didn't say yesterday, just because of what you just laid out there. Isaiah Stewart, a type of guy.
Oh, he's a maniac.
He's a maniac.
All right.
Hey, if you have any issues and you need somebody to step up for one of your guys, he might be a guy. But
another way to say that is he's a dog.
He's a
maybe
dog.
a little too much of a dog.
He might be too much of a dog, but he's also been too much of a dog in a bad situation.
Yeah.
So in a good situation, with the type of player, let's say you had a scoring wing, and then you had him, where he's doing all the dirty work. He will rebound.
Can shoot a little bit.
And he can shoot a little bit. We've seen that. He averaged only 6 boards. Jalen Duren got the double-figure rebounds. Joel Embiid is going to get the double-figure rebounds. Can he now get in there and get that 8 to 10 boards on average, score his 10 points on average, and give you somewhere 10 and 8, solid defense? Can he move enough on the perimeter? He's a big dude, but he can move. Yeah. And that's where, and then you also, maybe he can play some backup 5 minutes if Embiid is on the bench, and you have that with him. So just throwing that type of dog out there at that 4 where he is going to be in that dunker spot. Tyrese Maxey may not be throwing all these lobs. Donovan Mitchell is a better lob thrower, to be perfectly honest with you, in that type of role. Could you find that type of player in a new situation?
And it does have to be type of player in this instance because he makes, I think it's $15 million a year for the next few years. So in this situation, you cannot have that guy as one of your foundational guys. Yeah. But it is an example.
The role players make this type of money.
Yeah. It is an example, though, of the type of guy that maybe you want there. Somebody with some real, like a mean streak is a good way. And he's got a real mean streak.
He might be a rabid dog.
Listen, I don't want to go too far the dog road, right? Like at a certain point, it starts sounding weird coming from, but...
No, but we're talking in basketball terms.
Yeah.
Yes. So, right, yeah. But and that's where the fun off-season stuff comes into play. Yeah. The team building that we try to get in. And just to be clear, Derek is the one who always points out, your role player is going to make some money. Oh, yeah. So in that $15 million, it's not too crazy. Yeah. And he's a better version. Money Mar says he's exact as Paul Reed. I like Paul Reed too. He's not. I think he's better than Paul Reed, Money Mar. I think he's a little bit better. The only part with his not trusting is if he's going to blow a gasket. That's it.
And is it going to be at the other team or at your team or your coach?
Right. Man,
last year was his best shooting season ever. He shot 38% from 3, but prior to that, struggled. So that would be
about how many a game? 3, 4?
A little under 4.
Yeah,
3.8 per game.
But look, Mitchell's going to shoot 7 to 9. Maxey's going to shoot 7 to 9, and B's going to shoot his 3.
So that's actually another thing we haven't gotten to yet. If we're talking about offense and the fit and how it all works, Mitchell needs to buy in as a catch and shoot guy, and he is at least on decent volume. Like I think he took, 3.1 catch and shoot threes a game last season.
Anything is better than James Harden.
He made almost 41% of those. That's a really good number. Now here's where the concern comes in. And some of this is just a result of small sample size. Darius Garland didn't play that well. He only took 1.9 per game in the playoffs, 6.3 pull-up threes, which is only slightly more. So his catch and shoot attempts went down pretty significantly. Like he lost about a third of his in regular season number. And what that says is that when it got to playoff time, and we all saw it, right? He became a way, way, way more ball dominant player. And that would be the concern. I think all these guys would go into the regular season saying, yeah, like I'll take a step back. I'll do this. I'll play within the flow of the offense, all that. The one big concern I would have with Mitchell specifically is, does he just say, this is my offense? And there's upside to that, right? He's a great shot creator. He's become an even better playmaker over the years. I think he averaged something like 6 assists per game last season. And we've seen him grow from a guy who I thought was a black hole at the start of his career to someone who actually routinely looks to set other guys up. And I do think 48 minutes of pick and roll basketball with him and Tyrese as the ball handlers is awesome. It's just a matter of where Tyrese is someone who is good at toggling in between, I'm in setup mode or I'm in scorer mode. Donovan Mitchell
and the catch and shoot.
Yeah, and catch and shoot. Donovan Mitchell is a little more rigid in how he goes about it. And for good reason, right? He's a dynamic scorer, dynamic player, someone who demands the ball and should. But do you get into some ego battles? Do you get into some, hey, Donovan's been doing nothing but shooting the ball for 8 straight minutes. You already have that problem, I think, at times with Joel, where he'll just score and score and score, and then you need the rest of the guys. And it's like, well, this guy hasn't taken a shot in a quarter and a half. How are you going to expect them to make a catch and shoot 3? That would be a concern for me on his end.
Sure.
And frankly, over the long term, how does Tyrese adjust to going from, we know he's excelled next to James Harden and he can do it. Does he want to do that long term? And
Again,
we saw that happen. Mm-hmm. It's what's happening in Cleveland, right? Like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell. Hey, that seems great. Like 2 on-ball creators, guys with their own sets of skills. But now we're hearing, hey, Darius Garland probably doesn't want to stick around if Mitchell is here. And so they're represented by the same powerful agent that we mentioned early in the show.
Very much so.
Would be a big open question. So
Yeah.
we've done over an hour of basically saying,
And I still
Donovan
have
Mitchell
thoughts,
is
man.
a great player,
Right.
and I'm not even really sure.
We're not sure.
It's a big shrug of the shoulders.
Yeah, and then for me, I'm always big on this, and then we'll get to our super chats and get ready to get out of here. I'm always big on, have you played with a center like Joel Embiid? So with those catch and shoot situations, they might look a little bit different. Sure, the Garland creation, yes. He's being double teamed. Jared Allen wasn't being double teamed much. Yeah. Same for Mobley, and certainly not for Rudy Gobert. In this situation, there being a lot of double teams. I can see him catching because he's very good at this, especially in the corner. Catch, ball fake on the closeout.
Right to the rim.
Sidestep, first sidestep, and then shoot the 3. Or the closeout that we talk about, I'm attacking the rim. And I can see that from him. And then you got, let's just say hypothetically, Kelly Oubre or Isaiah Stewart right there in the dunker spot. You just drop it off, and they might finish at the rim. That's where that 6 assists comes in. The same thing for Maxey. So you can see where there's the positives, but as Kyle just laid out, you can also see the negatives that could potentially be there. There'll be a lot of conversations that need to be had before a move like this is made amongst the people who need to have this type of discussion. Everybody wants to do it until it doesn't work. It's all good to discuss it at All-Star games and in Olympics to have those conversations of we can do this, until you get into the actual games and you see how you react to that specific moment.
And frankly, it normally takes failing as a group for somebody to sit up and be like, hey, I need to be the guy who changes my game. One of my favorite examples are the LeBron era Heat, right? They get together, they sign, they do the big presser, we're gonna win 1,000 titles,
not one,
whatever.
Not 2.
The first season, they get to the finals, and LeBron lays an absolute egg, right? Like that's probably the biggest stain on his resume of any series.
Is that Dallas?
Yes.
JJ Barea, baby.
Barea, Deshaun Stevenson, Jason Terry, Dirk going
Chandler.
crazy as LeBron and Wade are mocking him in the middle of a game for being sick or whatever. After that season, and keep in mind, it's easy to I was always a big LeBron guy, but there are a lot of people who still are not and weren't then who are like, well, he's not clutch. He's not this. It's Dwayne Wade's team, all that. And I think Chris Bosh has rightfully gotten the credit for he changed his game. He became the center, more of a full-time center. So they're playing, it's not really small when you're playing LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade on the same floor. But they started playing small ball in the sense that they're spacing it out and they're opening it up for LeBron and Wade in the middle of the floor. To me, just as significantly, Dwayne Wade was willing to cede, okay, this is LeBron's team. I might be the franchise guy. I'm Mr. Miami. They came to my team with Pat Riley and Spo and whatever else. But LeBron noticeably stepped forward as the guy, where it was a lot of, in year one in Miami, it was your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. And they didn't feel like a cohesive group. It was like a band that's playing instruments, but not at the same time. It's like, all right, I'm going to do my guitar solo, then you're going to do a drum solo, and it's not all working in sync. And what they figured out was that Wade, they needed to lean into as the cutter, the slasher, the off-ball athlete. They took advantage of playing more transition defense. They amped it up in terms of the defensive pressure with the hedging and the blitzing, and they were able to get him offense in that way as well. They create so many turnovers that Dwayne Wade's going to get 20-plus on a given night, with half of those just being, we got runouts and we're throwing lobs and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But he, as the number 2 guy, also took a step back, and that was just as important. So it's easy to say, like, all right, one of these guys will be the 3rd guy, right? But the battle between who's the number 1 and the number 2 guy and how you're willing to shape and craft your game is just as essential. And that is not an easy thing. To your point, it's not just on paper. That's a real thing that you have to figure out in terms of the playbook, in terms of what you're running crunch time offense, what you're running in after timeout plays. It permeates through absolutely everything. And so the egos that need to be put aside, and all these guys rightfully have big egos. They're all-star, all-NBA type players. That's the biggest challenge, and it's always the final step between a bunch of talented guys winning a lot of games and a bunch of guys coming together to win a title.
The one part that should be at the head of that conversation, hey, Mitchell, we saw where you felt like you had to take those shots because others either weren't good enough or willing to do it. That's not a problem here.
Yeah.
Because the number 1 is the big fella. He's not worried. The other guy that you're probably taking some shots away, of course, and making that decision on where it goes, he's not afraid either. He might miss it, but he's not afraid to do it. And he is willing, as he has said many times where Joel Embiid has yelled at him, you need to take those shots. Hey, I thought Joel had the hot hand. Maxey says this all the time. I thought Joel had the hot hand. And they would yell at me about, no, you take the shots.
Be aggressive.
Be aggressive.
Go out there and get
open.
it.
Right. And that's where the one thing for Mitchell is he won't have to worry about, oh, I need to do it. If I have it going, I have it going. But I don't need to because the other 2 are more than capable and willing to do so and do the same thing. Man, we had a lot. We still. And Phil said, Devon, stop. Embiid struggles in the fourth quarters. We didn't say the fourth quarter. We just said in general, roll.
Yeah.
Fourth quarter, if he takes over, Mitchell, take over. I don't think anybody's going to be
Let him
mad.
go.
The same way that Joel said to Maxey.
Yeah.
You do it. And it's been done. So, Phil, you stop. Always love you. Let's go to our Super Chats. Liam, Marcus Morris moment of the night.
Hey, baby.
34 minutes, 5 for 6 from 3. He finished with 25 off the bench. He missed 3
cooking.
shots, 10 for 13. He was rolling. And then so I got a lot of stuff, as I said it last night on Twitter. He would have been perfect for those Tobias minutes.
I'm trying not to think of Tobias. Like, nice guy and all that.
People
right?
can't help it. You got to go back to it. He was making shots, man.
When you take 2 shots in a closeout
But
game,
we said it in the series.
Yeah.
Not to bring it back and not to harp on it, and we're not trying to make Marcus Morris into something that he is not at this stage of his career. But one thing he would not be afraid to do was shoot the basketball.
Yeah.
We might have questioned his shot selection.
And look, he had some bad moments in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You don't have to pretend that it was all. It's very. I'd say it's Buddy Hield-ish, where he had some struggles, and then hey, final game in the season.
But they were down a few men last night.
Yeah.
And he kept them in the game with Evan Mobley because Garland wasn't scoring. Karis LeVert, Donovan Mitchell weren't available. Jared Allen, he was out. Marcus Morris, that's why we have the fun. Marcus Morris moment of the night. And that's what he had last night.
Shout out to Marcus Morris.
No doubt. No doubt. He'll land somewhere else again next season. We'll see what he does. Final one, real time. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, what he said. Role players in Philly equals George Hill. Get a star. Well, George Hill was at the trade deadline. This is a calculated offseason move where if you decide that your picks you don't want to give up for the said player, it's not worth it. You're calculating how you're doing this with said role players that come in here, Caruso and
But to his point, I feel like I've been on this corner as we discuss every one of these guys that are coming up. Yeah, thank you to Real Time. I do think that it becomes clear to me the deeper we get in the offseason, like There is no replacement for star level talent. You can get a lot of, or let's say a few. Let's say you get 2, maybe 3 high-end role players. You might get to a playoff series where that role player is completely useless. And then what do? Like you don't have the fallback plan. You don't have the guy that you put the ball in their hands and say, go figure it out. Like the difference between having Jimmy Butler, for example, and having, let's say, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Alex Caruso, and Kelly Oubre, is that Jimmy Butler, when the chips are down, you can just throw that guy the ball and say,
go get it.
Figure it the hell out. And that is, I will say, I don't think that's as much of an option anymore for Paul George. I've said it when we did the Paul George podcast. I don't think he can leverage, he has as much leverage as a shot creator and a guy off the bounce anymore. And that'd be one of my big concerns with him as part of a big three. And I think anyone who pushes back on Paul George, that's a real thing to consider. But if KCP, Alex Caruso's of the world are 0 of 5 from 3, they're still giving you defensive value.
Yep.
But they don't have the option to just, hey, throw them the ball, let them go create something. And that is it doesn't have to be George Hill. It doesn't have to be Buddy Hield. These guys they've gotten at the deadline, but that's the risk that you run when you try to build a role players team. And again, I also circle back to a lot of this conversation comes down to how much belief do you have in Joel Embiid, and the levels of belief throughout the fan base and in the media and everywhere else are all over the place. And anybody who's skeptical of him, whether it's about skill set, whether it's about trusting him to stay healthy, those are genuine concerns. Now, some people take it to troll levels, right? Like not everyone is as, I'd say, genuine with their concerns as everyone else. But if you're not a believer in Joel Embiid, I get why you're like, hey, I don't want to pay. I don't want the Sixers to pay $49-50 million to Jimmy or Paul or whoever for the next few years. Like, don't take that swing. I get it. So we're going to be doing this a lot this whole offseason, looking at these fits and seeing exactly what needs to be given up in order to make these type of moves happen.
Phil says, if you're trying to win a ring, get Jimmy. See, there's going to be a lot of that. All right, folks.
I think Derek believes that Jimmy is coming. Derek's been banging that drum. We'll see.
Yeah. Will says, love the long pod. Well, it's ending now, Will. It's ending
with
now.
Just 2 of us, too.
And Derek said, give me a little bit more credit. I've been done driving. We know, Derek. Just wanted to have fun with that one. All right, let's say goodbye to a lot of the folks. We have a lot of folks in here today. For this one on the Thursday.
I'm going to need a Devon Givens tea after this one to, soothe my vocal cords.
Gotta have it.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who was here for a spirited conversation with Devon and I today. Thank you to Michael B, to Philly 007, to Kelly Oubre superfan, Phil W.
What up, Phil?
My girl Winona. I know she's got some ollipops hanging out in the fridge.
She also gave us some theater suggestions.
Winona, we will exchange some messages later. Hey, Aaron. Public enemy number 1, Money Marr, who Randy is trying to sell down the river for Evan Mobley, apparently. On my own yams now. I figured out how to pronounce it thanks to Jay of the Jungle, another chatter. So thank you to Jay and thank you to Yams for that. Guard Mello, Sean.
What up, Sean?
Dave, Rich P. Who else we got in here today? My guy Will, Eugene G. Ross.
What up, Gene? Checking in.
Haidar, Jeffrey K. Pye Lawrence Sr.
What up, senior?
There's it. I was going to say, we had the whole senior conversation the other day.
Yes, we did.
Bootzilla.
Boots.
Malcolm Carrington. Maine. Martian Lynch, the number 1 trash talker in all of PHLY chats.
Are you related to Jamie Lynch?
Undisputed in that regard.
All right.
Elephant in the room. Like I said the other day, why do you have to point out that I've been gaining weight this season? That's not very nice. X-Man. We got Kane. Brian Knight.
What up, Brian?
Who else we got in here today?
We
got a lot. It's a lot of repeat commenters is always the tough part. The hypothetical man. We got Brent. We got Joey.
What up, Joey?
I'm sure we had our guy Al,
Martian
the 2-minute
said
warning in
that's
here.
he and Jamie are cousins. There you go.
There you
Family
go.
affair here at PHLY.
Alex McElroy, Rick Sachs, Randy Rubart.
What up, Rick? Randy.
Sort of DJ Hammer.
DJ Hammer.
We also had our super chatters
Gotta get
today.
the Hammer
Liam
pants.
Stevens and Real Time with Prince Blue. Everyone, thank you for being here. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications
Sounds
each and
just
every
like
time that we go live.
What up, Jeff?
If you hit the thumbs up button, I'm not sure what will happen.
Something will.
Actually, here's a promise. If you hit the thumbs up button, we will have another member of the PHLY sports crew on the show on Monday, whose name I will not reveal now, but who...
I don't even know. Look at that. I don't even know that.
A special guest on the way.
Love it.
On Monday. So thank you,
Love it.
everyone. Devon and I and super producer Bree will be
Thank you,
back
Bree.
at 2:30 tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you then.
Yes.
We all silly like the mayor.